Well, let's return to those measures from the Chancellor's winter economy plan. Joining me now is the Director of the Institute of Public Policy Research, Carys Roberts, and former Chair of the Council of Economic Advisors, Rupert Harrison. Thank you both for joining us this evening. The Institute of Fiscal Studies said today that the job support scheme is significantly less generous than the existing furlough scheme. Do you support these messages? Because there are somewhere in the region of 3 million people currently on the furlough scheme who don't know if they're going to have a job to go back to in a few months' time.
Well, the IFS are right about that. So while it was very good to see the Chancellor finally heeding calls to have a replacement for the job retention scheme, in many ways it did fall short. Now, there were three major problems with what he announced. The first is that it required too great a contribution from employers, which means that actually it doesn't act as an effective incentive to keep on workers. And he missed an opportunity there to save many jobs. The second is that it requires a big cut in pay for people across the country, and that's going to be coming at a very difficult time. And then the third is that it doesn't do anything for those sectors that actually still have to stay completely shut. So thinking about the events industry, the arts, music, so many across the country will be asking why the Chancellor couldn't have designed the scheme slightly differently to protect their jobs too.
Rupert, just picking up on the point about the contributions from employers. Under the current system, the employer chips in 20% of the employee's wages. Under this new scheme, it is 55%. I guess the challenge is that we don't know exactly if businesses are going to lay off people who are permanent staff and then hire them as on a part-time basis. And really listening to the Chancellor earlier on today, he didn't really answer that question.
Well, in a sense, we want people to be kept on employed on a part-time basis, but with all of these schemes, we know with the furlough scheme there has been some abuse. Like when you design massive interventions in the economy at speed, you know that not every pound is going to be spent perfectly, but you shouldn't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. More generally, I think that some of the issues raised about the design, I think it has been actually deliberately calibrated to, the Chancellor talked very deliberately today in a slightly different tone about more permanent adjustment in the economy. And he is right in that even if we get a vaccine, let's say in 6 months' time, life is returning to normal, there are very large parts of our economy that are going to be permanently changed. This crisis has accelerated some big changes in the structure of our economy, from people shopping in the high streets, shopping at home, more people working at home, changing where they live, where they consume. And that is sadly going to always does create dynamic disruption to the economy. And that for individuals, that means that some businesses are not going to survive or are going to have to change dramatically, and some jobs are going to have to change. And I think that the incentives in the scheme are actually deliberately designed to make companies think very carefully about which jobs are sustainable, what they have to do to adapt and change. And the Chancellor is confronting the fact that we can't just freeze the economy as it was 6 months ago. We have to start adapting to the new normal.
And Carys, the Chancellor did say today that this is a 6-month scheme, but he is prepared to do more. If you can look at countries like Germany and France who have their own existing job retention schemes, France has extended it for up to 2 years. Germany has extended it for another year. Is this something that is going to be knocked on for another 6 months, depending where we are with the pandemic?
That all depends on what the Chancellor does and if he's prepared to match his economic response to what's going on with the public health situation. I would certainly say that we should be looking to countries like Germany that have one of these schemes that was very effective at preventing job losses in the past. And just to go to that point about the future economy and moving forwards, I completely agree, but that needs to come through concerted government effort to protect the viable jobs and create new ones. And that was really missing today as well. There wasn't much in there on what the jobs of the future are going to be and what action the government is taking to get there.
And Rupert, how do we determine what is a viable job? Because there'll be business owners up and down the country who are now facing closure, who will say, look, my business is viable as long as I can get the requested government support. And many of them, whether they're in the hospitality sector, they're in the entertainment business, they feel like they've been left out in all of this.
No, it's very difficult, but one thing is absolutely true. The government cannot determine where the future jobs are going to come from, and the government cannot be the people to decide which jobs are sustainable. That has to be individual businesses who know the situation they face, who are making decisions about can they adapt, can they change the way they do things. And it is, I agree, particularly difficult for businesses in hospitality and parts of the economy that are still very severely restricted. But the government are effectively saying, look, we cannot provide a bridge, an endless bridge, where we don't know what the final point is going to be. And so, sadly, the challenge for those businesses is, can I find a way to adapt? Can I move what I do outside? Can I use my resources to provide a different kind of service? Can I find a different way to grow my business and employ people? And if they can't do that, then they're facing, yes, very, very tough decisions. But I think it is correct that the government cannot endlessly support businesses on the basis of an uncertain future. There has to come a point at which we allow businesses themselves to decide what's viable.
And Carys, we're now going to have to look at retraining people moving on into the future. Historically speaking, are we good at this? Germany, as another example, are known to have a very good apprentice system. I guess if you look at many of the mining communities in the north of England, they would say, well, perhaps we're not so good at this.
I think there are different examples you could draw on. We do have the apprenticeship scheme. I think that could be built on, and there's real potential through the Kickstart scheme that the government have announced. So there is potential there, but you're right. In the past, we have not managed to work with communities to ensure that they have the opportunities they need. That's partly about training. It's also about investing and making sure that there's certainty for business to know that they can grow their workforces and invest in their futures. In the past, we've let places down, and this time has to be different.
Thank you.